digits, 11 or 12 in the south, so mild but murky, and that murky weather persists during Thursday evening. Again, some foggy conditions on some of the higher routes leading into Friday. A few more showers keeping going across Scotland and Northern Ireland into Friday, but the main focus for Friday will be this band of rain sweeping in. Lots of people hitting the roads on Friday, of course, so just bear that in mind. Going to generate a lot of spray and surface water, and still poor visibility on some of the higher routes especially, as that rain band then by the end of Friday spreads into northern England and Northern Ireland. Behind it, it may well turn brighter during Friday afternoon. Still pretty mild here as well, and still fairly cold further north, and that contrast for the next few days will continue, but the milder air will win out further north as we head into the Christmas period, before perhaps turning colder as we head towards Boxing Day. Bye for now.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Hey, welcome along, you wonderful people, to Wednesday's edition of the Mark Steyn Show with me, Patrick Christys, and I am bang up for it tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We have a stellar lineup of stories and guests for you today, so you will not want to miss it. Taxi drivers and army reserves, they've stepped up to the plate today as over 26,000 ambulance workers started their first day of strike action. Ambulance Trust declared critical emergencies today, whilst patients in need of urgent treatment were told, oh, just get a cab to hospital, that'll do. Former ambulance worker Katie Strickland will be here to discuss why she thinks the strikes are important, but that the consequences are even more important and they should not be ignored. And some more big news today. The SNP has resumed considerations for children as young as 15 years old to start the process of legally changing their sex and gender. Sources inside Westminster have said that the very controversial reform going through its final stages in the Scottish Parliament has left MSPs feeling scared to speak out. I'm not surprised. Women's rights activist, the one and only Kelly J. Keane, will be joining to discuss this. You won't want to miss that one. She's going to kick right off, and rightly so as well. According to new research released today, tens of thousands of homeless children in temporary accommodation within the UK do not have a bed of their own to sleep in, as Christmas is just around the corner. Meanwhile, the Home Office spends up to £6 million a day on housing illegal Channel migrants. Go figure. We will ask, does the UK government have their priorities all wrong? With political commentator Maya Tuzi and writer Samantha Smith. Plus, Carl's decision to expand, that's Sadiq by the way, to expand London's low-emission zone has been slaughtered by MPs as they warn its impacts could be detrimental to small businesses within the M25. And by the way, this isn't just London-centric, because this is coming to a city near you, people. On this issue will be director of Car 26, Louise Perry. We'll always bring you the stories that matter most, and we will lead the news agenda. Others will just have to follow. And of course, the most important part of the show is where you get to give me a good pummeling, you lucky people. GBviews at gbnews.uk. You can ask me anything you want, and I will do my best to answer it. That's all coming your way very, very shortly. But first, it's the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. Within the last hour, President Joe Biden has welcomed his Ukrainian counterpart to the White House in Washington. It's Volodymyr Zelensky's first foreign trip since the start of the Russian invasion. President Biden said Americans stood proudly with the people of Ukraine as they defended their country against Putin's aggression. Zelensky said he felt honoured to be invited and thanked the US president for ongoing military support. He's also expected to address the US Congress later this evening. Early this week, the US announced a further £1.5 billion in military aid, including a Patriot missile system to help Ukraine defend its infrastructure against Russian attacks. Ambulance unions have reacted angrily after the government accused them of making a conscious choice to harm patients by going out on strike. Steve Barclay claims unions are refusing to work with the government.
What do we want? When do we want it? When?
As I was saying, Steve Barclay claims unions are refusing to work with the government at a national level on how paramedics will cover emergency calls during strike action. The Unite union says the Health Secretary's comments are a blatant lie, and the GMB union described them as insulting. Unison's General Secretary, Christina McNay, says Mr Barclay is refusing to discuss pay.
We sit down in a room, you have a bit of give and take on both sides. But I'm getting nothing from him or from this government. All they're saying to me is, we can't negotiate about pay. And where does that leave us? One of the reasons the ambulance service, the NHS, is in such a dire state is because they haven't invested in the workforce. So people leave. Those who are left are under increasing pressure. These people don't get meal breaks. They hardly get a day off. They work excessive overtime because it's the only way the service can run.
But the Health Secretary maintains the government is trying to work constructively with unions.
Clearly, we will need to look at the data from today to see whether the exemptions that the trade unions have promised materialise. They've said, on the one hand, they want to cause maximum disruption, but on the other hand, that they don't want to cause harm to patients. So we've tried to work constructively with the trade unions, but of course, if we see significant patient harm, then as a government we will need to look at what is done in terms of minimum service levels.
A man who admitted murdering his pregnant partner and 3 children in Derbyshire will serve the rest of his life in jail. Damien Bendel was given a whole life order for killing Terry Harris, her children Lacey and John Paul Bennett, and Lacey's friend Connie Gent in September last year. The prosecutor told the court they were brutal, vicious and cruel attacks. That's the news on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Mark Steyn with Patrick Christis.
Scotland, a country of outstanding natural beauty, a country with a proud history. It's produced sporting greats like Alex Ferguson and Chris Hoy, inventors like Alexander Graham Bell. And now it's a country led by a woman who looks like Elton John, where male rapists can self-identify as women so they can carry on raping in women's prisons. This, ladies and gentlemen, is progress, apparently. The SNP and Scottish Labour is forcing through new laws that mean people on the sex offenders register could, in theory, just change their gender. They could then change their names and essentially disappear from public records and actually find it easier to carry out their warped sexual desires. Women will no longer be safe in Scotland, in my view, and neither will children. 16 and 17-year-olds in Scotland will be able to apply for a gender recognition certificate for the first time. They can change their gender and sex without a doctor diagnosing them with gender dysphoria. In fact, they just have to live with their chosen gender for around 3 months. So a sexually confused child, potentially with learning difficulties, say, could just put a dress on for 3 months and become a girl, free to walk into a girls' changing room at their secondary school and expose their penis to a load of other kids. But that, of course, is progress. In Scotland, children aged 4 can already change their gender on the school register without their parents' consent. So parents who go to work every day to pay for their children to live, to look after them, they turn up to parents' evening one day to discover that Timothy is now Tamara. But here's another kicker. Little wee Jimmy Cranky up in Scotland could actually turn the UK into a paradise, potentially, for sex offenders. Perverts and sex criminals could go to Scotland, live as a woman for a matter of weeks, legally change their sex and gender, and then come back down to England, Wales or Northern Ireland, walk into a woman's toilet in a nightclub unchallenged, and do whatever they like to drunk girls to their heart's content. But why is there so much urgency to pass this stuff through in Scotland? The SNP and Scottish Labour have whipped their MSPs to back this. There are strong rumours, and they are just rumours, that Nicola Sturgeon, you know, the one who sang Rocket Man, I think, there are strong rumours that she's trying to rush this through Parliament before one of her own ministers gets back from maternity leave so that she wouldn't have to vote against it and stand down. That's remarkable if true. But that question of why is important more generally. Why? Why do this? Why spend hours urgently trying to rush something through that there just isn't massive public clamour for? It's hard to get precise figures on the percentage of the UK population that is trans, but studies in Brazil appear to show that just 0.1% of the people there are apparently trans, and around 1.6 million people in the whole of America are trans. Bear in mind that the US population is somewhere in the region of 330 million. And then we have the ultimate madness of it all, because in Scotland now, the SNP, Scottish Labour, the Lib Dems and the Greens are about to make a decision that affects the health and well-being of every single child and every single woman in order to appease a fraction of a percentage of their population. It makes no sense. I mean, look, maybe Nicola Candle-in-the-Wind Sturgeon is confused about what it means to be a woman, but there is nothing progressive about a child with mental health problems being able to mutilate their own genitalia more easily, or a woman having to fight off male sex offenders in their changing rooms. That's not progress. That is lunacy, and that is the SNP. Well, there's loads of people who've been getting in touch on that already, as well as I can see the inbox lighting up. But I believe now we can go to Kelly J. Keane. Is that right? I believe. Oh, no, we're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that. In fact, we're going to return to what has been one of the top stories of the day, because before we go back to that, 999 calls have plummeted across certain parts of the country. This is the ambulance strikes amidst concerns that people are suffering in silence. And I am joined now, there we go, by former ambulance technician Katie Strickland. Katie, thank you very much. Obviously, a very, very different topic there. Good to have you on, though. So, look, Katie, just talk to me a little bit about this massive public concern about the ambulance strikes and people now not calling in. Where do you stand on ambulance strikes?
I mean, I left the ambulance service about a year ago, but if I was still in the ambulance service, I would be striking. I think it's been a while, it's been a long time coming, but it definitely needs to be raised. I know there will be consequences for this. I know that the army have stepped in and they're going to do a great job, but they're never going to be able to cover the ground that a full crew of ambulance staff will. So I think it's needed. I think hopefully, it sounds morbid, but hopefully the consequences will open the eyes of the people who need to listen.
Yeah, and my main concern about this is, yes, OK, I am in favour of a pay rise for staff like paramedics, call handlers, nurses, etc. My latest understanding of what they want is somewhere way above actual inflation, which I think, frankly, is probably unaffordable because the knock-on effects that would mean for things like rail workers, I mean, even down to driving examiners, apparently. Everyone wants a pay rise way above inflation. I don't think, as a country, that is affordable, and both the leader of the Labour Party and the leader of the Conservative Party would agree with me on that one. But some people would say, members of the public, we locked down to protect our NHS. People had their lives ruined, and now people have to die in order for the NHS to make another point about, weirdly, patient safety. Is there any truth to that?
You make a good point. I think there needs to be a compromise. I do agree that striking is going to have, catastrophic issues. And perhaps what they're asking for is a little too much. But I think also the larger picture is the support that has been lacking throughout the pandemic. Of course, it was a difficult time, but it had huge impact. I mean, ultimately, it was why I left the NHS. I saw a really ugly side of the NHS whilst working throughout the whole of the pandemic. I felt totally unsupported. I know all of my colleagues did as well. And I think enough is obviously enough for a lot of people. So I think there's that wider picture to consider as well. But you're right, it's a fine balance between, giving a pay rise, but perhaps also compromising and accepting that there are other costs as well.
Do you think, though, that they like to say, oh, it's not all about pay? I suspect that if you just gave them what they wanted in terms of pay, which would be, roughly speaking, about a 16 to a 19% pay rise, and didn't change any of the working conditions, they'd crack on. So is it all about pay, realistically?
I think you're right. I don't think it's all about pay, because I think if the conditions weren't so bad, people wouldn't be thinking, well, why am I working for such an awful salary in such rubbish conditions? Because most paramedics, they do it for the love of the job and for the love of caring for people. The majority of paramedics, it's not about the salary. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it for so long. I think highlighting the issues and how bad it's been over the last couple of years has made people go, I'm not being paid enough to do this. This is not enough money to justify the enormous queues and the stress and the risk.
I just wonder whether or not well-meaning members of the paramedic staff, the ambulance staff, or indeed nurses are being led along by unions with, frankly, communist intentions. You don't have to look very far in a union to find a communist. And I spoke to one ambulance call handler yesterday who didn't know what the pay offer given to her was, or really what pay offer she wanted to receive. She was leaving it in the hands of the unions. And I think, personally, that's quite a risky business.
Maybe there's a bit of a blurred line between people are being offered an opportunity to stand up for a system that is affecting them on a day-to-day basis. And perhaps people aren't fully aware of what they're striking for. Maybe the evidence isn't and the knowledge isn't there. They're striking because it's an opportunity to have a voice heard. But maybe ultimately it's not just about the money, it's a bigger picture.
Do you think it might backfire in the sense that at the minute around 63% of the British public support ambulance workers going on strike, around 65% support nurses going on strike? The longer this goes on and the more utter horror stories that you read about, elderly people or women in the late stages of a complicated labour, babies dying at home, all of this stuff, if public support massively goes on the slide for these things, then actually paramedics or ambulance workers or nurses become hate figures.
I mean, of course, people also who don't work in the ambulance service don't see the day-to-day picture. So it's easy to put numbers. And of course, death and people in critical conditions with no help is a horrifying story. although this happens on a daily basis. And so it's easy to put these numbers and say, look at this story of this person who wasn't given help for 6 hours because of a strike. Well, the reality was that was happening before the strike.
Yeah.
People were having cardiac arrests and not being reached to for a number of hours in the first place. So I don't know how much...
And it's important to stress that. It is important to stress that. Katie, can I ask you a question that I'm not sure you might be asked that much on national media at the minute? When you were an ambulance technician, did you have some days, or is there a day or a moment that stood out for you where you were actually really happy? You were like, this is what I do it for. Was there ever a really good moment for you?
Absolutely. I think the reason that we did what we did and paramedics do what they do is it is unbelievably rewarding when you go to a patient who is in an awful situation and you're helping them out, saving a life, or even helping someone with mental health things going on. It's massively rewarding. It is the reason why I stuck out at it for almost 2.5 years. And I thought about leaving a lot, but it was days like that that made me think I want to stay and continue the job.
Well, Katie,
absolutely.
Can I just say thank you? One thing I do find remarkable is that, let's be honest, if I went on strike, no one would notice. In fact, the viewing figures would probably go up, actually, to be fair. But, Katie, there will be people out there now watching this or listening to this whose lives you will have saved. And that is a remarkable thing to think. And regardless of whether or not people support these strikes or they think that maybe morally it's OK, etc., the fact is that there are actual genuine lifesavers out there, and you are one of them. So good for you, Katie. Take care. Katie Strickland now, who is a former ambulance technician. I hope really kind of outlining more of the nuance around these ambulance strikes and the workers' strikes, etc., that are going on. But I cannot help but feel that, yes, whilst the vast majority of the British public, and the figures don't lie, around 65% of people supporting nurses, around 63% of people supporting the ambulance workers on strike, I cannot help but feel in the coming days or months, if this rumbles on, those numbers will turn. I just wonder what the compromise is going to be. What's the wiggle room going to be on pay? Because at the moment, 16 to 19%, too much when you bracket it in with all of the other areas that want pay rises of a similar amount as well. What will that compromise be? But anyway, there we go. I've got a comment here from Unison, which is one of the unions helping to organise this strike action. Steve Barclay has waited until the day of the strike to gripe about the supposed lack of contingency arrangements. As the Secretary of State knows only full well, agreements have been made locally between unions and employers in each ambulance service. A proper pay rise this year won't solve every problem in the NHS, but it'd help stem the tide of staff leaving. They're exhausted, feel hugely undervalued, and can easily find better paid work elsewhere. There's a lot more to it, but we haven't got all day, people, so I'm going to move it on. Coming up, thousands of British children will be without their own bed, or indeed any bed, actually, this Christmas. Whilst, get this, illegal migrants are moved to 5-star hotels. We will be talking about this with political commentator Maya Tusi and writer Samantha Smith. But before that, children as young as 15 will be allowed to legally change their gender. You heard me ranting about this a bit earlier on. That's according to a law in Scotland. Women's rights activist Kelly J. Keane will be here to discuss the SNP's controversial decision. Yes, there she is. Fantastic, fantastic human being, Kelly J. Keane. I'll be speaking to woman, of course, in the context of what we're talking about. I'll be speaking to her very, very soon. Don't you dare move that dial, people.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, GB News is the People's Channel, so let's hear what some of the people have had to say. We asked you, should 15-year-olds be allowed to make life-altering decisions, i.e. change their sex and gender? Susie says, absolutely no. 18 years old should be when a child/young adult can make wise decisions about who they wish to be. Anything before potentially could be regretted or irreversible. 100% Susie, I am convinced that we're going to see an utter catastrophe looming, where people have made decisions at the ages of 14, 15, even younger in some cases, and they go on to end up hating themselves for the rest of their lives. Suicide, etc. I can see it coming and I hate it. Leslie says, even asking this question shows how dire a situation we are in. Please, can we go back to some kind of normality? That ship has sailed, unfortunately. Normality is long gone, especially north of the border, where right now MSPs have been voting on whether or not, essentially, it should be easier for children to either mutilate their own bodies or indeed actually define as a woman. Sex offenders can define as women now and just carry on raping in women's spaces. It is nuts, for want of a better phrase. Mr. Blundo says, no, they should not, and people should leave them alone and not put pressure on them to make decisions. Thank you very much, Mr. Blundo, by the way, because this is the thing. It starts in the schools, in my opinion. It starts in the schools. Up north in Scotland, from the age of 4, a child can decide to change their sex and gender on the register without their parents' consent, or indeed without the parents knowing about it. They just find out on parents' evening when Timothy has turned into Tamara. Where does all of that come from? I'm convinced that kids don't just make those decisions for themselves. No, who is it? It's always Sandra from the geography department or some completely unqualified middle-aged woman or man who decides to rock up and pump a kid's head full of absolute utter nonsense. Just one more quick one. Who's this from? Trish. This has to stop. Child abuse. People are waiting for real health care, and this is what governments spend money on. Right, OK, what's going on up there, then? Up there, in that hideous monstrosity of a Parliament building that the new Labour regime gifted the Scots back in '99. Seriously, just go and take a look at it. It's like a boil on the face of an otherwise cracker of a city. Well, anyhow, what has been going on with that today? So the SNP today fought off a last-ditch bid to block 15-year-old children from beginning the process of being able to change their gender. 15 years old. We don't let children that age buy paracetamol for a headache, for heaven's sake. One woman who has been very vocal about this and has faced fierce pushback against her is the wonderful Kelly J. Keane. She's on the line with us right now. Kelly, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you do, because one day I might have a daughter or a niece, and I will be very glad that women like you exist, because you will be doing everything you can to make the world a much safer place for them. But, Kelly, what do you make of this ruling today? Should we start with the fact that just 15 years old, this is before we move on to sex offenders, the kids stuff? Talk to me about that.
Well, I wonder if the two aren't very inextricably linked, sex offenders and kids being able to consent to such devastating decisions. You do have to wonder, when Scottish Parliament come on the side of kids being able to make irreversible decisions and rapists in women's prisons and having unfettered access to women, you really want to ask about the hard drives of those MSPs.
Do you actually think that there is something more sinister going on here, that actually it's not just about, kind of flag-waving rights, that actually there is an element of kind of rather nasty child sexual abuse as an undercurrent of this?
I think there's both. I think there are definitely people who are really sinister, who are benefiting from this stupidity. I think there's a lot of people that think it's some sort of easy power grab. And so they can, the power at the moment seems to be progressive. And I use that word with both of us knowing I'm being sarcastic, I hope. Yeah. But power is now seen as saying things, not really doing much. I mean, in order to allow a child to transition legally, which personally, I don't think that should be something that any country does at all, ever. I don't think we should legally be able to change our sex. But allowing a child to do that doesn't take much, does it? You're not saving them from starvation. You're not educating them. You're not providing them with good housing. You can just say that you're a really lovely government because you're really focusing, caring about kids, introducing them to drag queens at 4 and 5 years old and all that great stuff. And you don't actually have to put your hands in your very deep pockets at all.
No, absolutely not. And my take on it is that this affects potentially every single child and every single woman at the cost of just appeasing and making happy a fraction of a percentage of the Scottish population who would seek to benefit from this. It just doesn't make sense. Why are they willing to disregard what women think and, frankly, child safety in order to appease people who change their flag every 2 minutes?
Well, I think they're incompetent as well as stupid, as well as maybe personally invested. I think some people can't really see beyond something that's supposed to make them look like a nice person. For example, the truth would be something that maybe they would want to align themselves with, but they're not particularly bothered. They all want to be re-elected. They've spent far too much time on social media and think this is a genuine issue that normal people care about. I don't know if they've noticed, but we're just about to go into a winter with a cost of living crisis. I think most people are a little bit more worried about that than anything else. But once you start telling the electorate, once you start telling normal people that actually what it means is when their elderly mother is in a care home, that she can't choose to be intimately cared for by a female, or when she goes into a hospital ward, she might have some bloke next to her who calls himself a woman who decides to have a great time all night. When you talk about those real life situations, there's no normal people that think that's remotely okay. Not at all.
Do you think Nicola Sturgeon struggles with the definition of what a woman is? Do you think she knows?
I have a lot of ideas about what Nicola Sturgeon may or may not think. Probably not fit for broadcast. But there's something going on. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some big hefty wad of cash, because how can you have such a powerful position? You can't be completely stupid. So there must be something else that you gain. I have no idea what it is, but it doesn't make me think about fluffy kittens at all. It makes me think about flipping tables.
Yeah, I can believe that, Kelly. And where will this end, Kelly? Because I am absolutely terrified, and I hate to say this, I'm terrified of having a daughter, right? And this is like the opposite of what this stuff is supposed to do. Before, maybe back in the day, blokes would have liked to have had a son so they can go, I want to take him to the football and this, that. No, now I actually want to have a son so that I don't have to deal with the day-to-day rage of the idea that some bloke called Gary, who's dressed as a woman in Scotland for 3 months, might be able to go into a swimming bath, a female changing room at a swimming bath, and be in the same room as her, or that there's some teacher at school who's saying that this is all the right thing to do. I'm just terrified of it, because I'm not sure I could live with the unrelenting anxiety of having a daughter in this day and age. And I hate to say that, but it's true.
Well, you mentioned Gary. Gary Glitter's just about to be released, isn't he? Wherever he is in the world, in prison for raping children. He can just call himself Janet, and he can move to Scotland and he'll be fine. He can have unfettered access to women-only spaces, and maybe he could be a girl guide leader and go away on a little camp with some children. So these are the real-life consequences. I mean, you say about having a son, but we are bringing up a generation of children that cannot spot the truth, that will not be able to say a woman is an adult human female, that will not understand the fundamental foundation of truth that we happily have been raised upon. So I do worry about the overwhelming legacy of what that does to a population.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Kelly, look, thank you very, very much. And can I just say, actually, quickly, before I let you get going, actually, you face a remarkable amount of backlash from this. Where does that tend to come from? Do you think it's from people who have drunk the woke Kool-Aid, or is it from people who are actually in that trans community? What is it?
Well, it's a little bit of both. It's basically people don't like women saying no, especially when they mean it. So that's where it comes from. It just comes from a nice dose of misogyny, which is a word that I hate to use, but it just feels so apt.
Well, if it exists, it exists, and that's a problem, isn't it? Kelly, thank you very, very much. Kelly J. Keane, just absolutely wonderful woman. An absolutely wonderful woman. All power to her, as far as I'm concerned. Next up, we're covering the shocking statistic released by Shelter that 1 in 100 children may be without a stable roof over their heads this Christmas. By the way, Shelter are going on strike. You might want to know that. Why? Oh, because they're not getting enough money. Anyway, this at a time when the government is shelling out more than £2 billion a year on hotels for asylum seekers. Have we got our priorities all wrong? Mayor Toosey and Samantha Smith will be with us for that. There they are. Look at them. Fantastic people, both of them. Anyway, but last but not least, of course, strange things are afoot with councils, aren't they? Zoning off bits of cities, moving permits, etc., etc. Is this all just innocuous stuff, or are we heading towards something much more sinister? Climate lockdowns, perhaps. The lovely Louise Perry is with us for that one. Make sure you stay tuned.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrow.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, welcome back, everybody. Now, new research revealed today from homeless charity Shelter that tens of thousands of children across England will spend Christmas without a bed of their own. And you might think that homeless people, children especially, would be at the top of the government's list of priorities. But I'm afraid to say, think again. Because a Freedom of Information request has revealed that 8 homeless people were removed from a hotel in Crawley to make way for the government's migrant hotel policy. Couple load of that, eh? Now, that disgraceful news only adds insult to injury, as we know that migrants have been housed in places like this. That's Stokes Rochford Hall. Look at that. That's Stokes Rochford Hall, generally about £400 a night, by the way. All the while, we've had children kept in youth hostels or even just out on the streets. Maybe if we put as much effort into housing homeless kids as we have housing migrants, we'd actually be able to tackle this problem. But it's clear that we know where our leaders' priorities stand. I'm joined now by commentator and YouTuber Maya Tuzi and columnist Samantha Smith. Samantha, I'll start with you. People will be looking at this now going, this is an absolute disgrace. Our government has got the priorities all wrong. Illegal immigrants instead of homeless kids.
I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there, Patrick. When I was 16, I was homeless. I was living in kids' homes and in sheltered accommodations in, a place that had mold in the washing machine and a wasp infestation in the ceiling, versus that sprawling palace that you've just shown that's holding illegal immigrants and asylum seekers in I can't remember exactly where it is that you said, but it just speaks to the indifference with which children are treated in this country. I know that I spent 14 months sofa surfing, flitting from co-workers to friends' houses, not knowing whether I was going to spend the night sat in McDonald's nursing a cup of coffee and trying to stay awake until the next morning. Meanwhile, it seems that the open borders policy is welcoming illegal immigrants and giving them a 5-star resort experience. Illegal immigrants are being treated with more dignity and humanity than our very own children. We're ignoring a crisis in our own backyard, and it really serves as a slap in the face to see those sprawling palatial grounds that asylum seekers and migrants are kept in, while I couldn't even turn my light on some days because there were wasps trapped in the ceiling light.
It's just shocking. It's shocking. It makes me incredibly, incredibly angry. That is the what of what is happening. Maya, I will ask you, why do you think this is happening? Oh, I think you've just 1 sec, Maya, unmute yourself. Oh, no. All right, I'll go back. Oh, sorry about this. I can't hear you at all. Sorry about that. We'll get you sorted. Don't worry, Maya. Because, Samantha, I'll come back to you. Why do you think this is happening?
I think that it pays testament to decades of neglect and indifference and ignorance towards children in this country. We've seen it with the grooming gang scandal. We've seen it with the 120,000 plus kids that are now facing a Christmas in temporary accommodation without a bed or space to play, or a safe space to rest their heads at night. It just screams for the fact that children, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, are treated as second-class citizens. The fact that migrants, to whom, frankly, the government shouldn't owe any duty, illegal immigrants and false asylum seekers from countries like Albania, the fact that they're treated with more dignity than our own kids is, frankly, a national scandal that should be...
How does it make you feel, Samantha, when you see people standing there with things like, the refugees welcome sign, people like Gary Lineker piping up on Twitter saying, I'm going to house her, a refugee. Oh, Maya's back. I'll ask you this then, Maya. Good stuff. All right, sorry about that. How does it make you feel when you see people there going, you know, refugees welcome, and then you look at things like in schools, you know, white working class boys, probably the least well-performing bunch of people. We've got homeless kids who are already here, homeless veterans and all of that stuff. What's going on? Why is this happening?
It's because, I mean, in terms of how you feel, it's on behalf of the British people, it's mostly that we don't feel that we're in control. It's because there's absolute lack of appetite from both the media, the legacy media establishment, as well as the political class. Two examples, I'll tell you the reality. For example, Rishi Sunak and the political class focus on certain aspects of this crisis because they don't want to be too politically incorrect. He would say, oh, I'm going to come to Parliament and I'm going to talk about the backlog, the case backlog. I'm going to fix that. That's the problem. The media yesterday, the BBC, talked about fruit picking, saying we're going to bring in 45,000 fruit pickers and, oh, this might be an issue with migration. Whereas they forgot about another story that happened. It's on the same day. There's a social market foundation found that the government will have to bring in over 1 million migrants a year extra just to sort out the wound of the GDP floor. And it is just a plaster. They don't want to talk about the real issues. They don't want to talk about the impact on not just the local economies, but also the cultural aspects of it. And well, if they're not talking about it, of course, you guys are good, GBNews, you guys are discussing it. But if they're not creating the narrative, then we're not in control.
Samantha, do you think that we should live in a country where actually our politicians are unashamed about saying we will house our own before we house people who come across in a dinghy?
Well, the government is meant to be reflective of society, isn't it? And I think that, you know, the scenes that we've seen over recent months of the social media warriors saying that they're more than happy to house an Albanian refugee or an asylum seeker in their homes. Why is that same courtesy not extended to our own kids? If more people were perhaps willing to see children as humans deserving support and deserving a home and a roof and food on the table, then maybe I wouldn't have had to sofa surf for 14 months. Maybe kids like me wouldn't still be rotting away silent and unseen in homes that have very poor sanitation, poor accommodation, absolutely dire facilities. Maybe children would be allowed a proper opportunity to grow up and to develop into human beings if they were treated like such by the government and by taxpayers.
Samantha, thank you. Now, Maya, I'm going to get shouted at for this, but I'm just going to give you the final say. I see you're itching, but you're going to have to keep it brief. Go on. What do you want to say?
I know we can focus on people like Gary Lineker and all the celebrities being hypocrites, but we have to focus on the real people in charge who are hypocrites. Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP government refusing to accept the so-called asylum seekers in Scotland. We have to talk about that rather than just the celebrities.
Yeah, spot on. OK, both of you, thank you very, very much. Thoroughly enjoyed that informative and insightful stuff. That is commentator and YouTuber Maya Toosey and columnist Samantha Smith. Right, coming up, were you worried that Sadiq Khan, yes, everybody's favourite London mayor, was leaving after his 11th year in power? Well, worry not, because he'll be getting a third term. And if you think this is too London-centric, please, let me reassure you, don't worry, this does actually affect the whole of the UK. Joining me to discuss his ULEZ expansion plan is Lois Perry. Don't go anywhere, people. I'll be back in a tick.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
He can't stop. He won't stop. Sadiq Khan's expansion of London's ultra-low emission zone will crucify small businesses, MPs have warned. And this isn't just a London thing, people. It's coming to a place near you. Sadiq Khan, who is running for his third term as Mayor of London, has announced plans to expand the London ULEZ in August next year to cover almost all of the area inside the M25. Motorists whose cars were produced before 2005 will be hit with a charge of £12.50 for entering the city. So if you want to ride around, you will have money to burn, quite literally. And bear in mind the kind of person, right, who's driving around in a car older than 2005 is probably, dare I say it, the kind of person who might struggle to afford a new car. Therefore, they're going to have to pay £12.50 a day, which means they won't be able to pay that, so they'll be skint and they'll be out of business. Anyway, this isn't just a London problem, no. We've seen this initiative popping up all over the UK with the Oxford Zero Emission Zone scheme, Canterbury's plan to ban drivers entering certain zones, Bristol's £9 a day charge on older cars. The list goes on and on and on. Don't get me started on Birmingham. Anyway, it's all part of this big net zero agenda. There are schemes coming out of our backsides to try to make us all cleaner and greener. The big question is, though, do we have a right to freedom of movement within our own country? Here to break this down is the director of Car 26. It's Lois Perry. Lois, thank you very much. Great to have you in the studio.
No,
are you
thank
massively concerned about the fact that our civil liberties are curtailed in the name of this net zero agenda?
Absolutely. I mean, what else can you think when you're having areas broken up into zones and you can only go into a different zone, even if it's in the next street? I think it's twice a month you can do it or something in Canterbury and Oxford. It's completely insane. I mean, in the past, we watched these sci-fi movies, didn't we, about areas being broken up into sort of dystopian areas and zones and things like that. And we thought, oh, that could never happen. That would never happen. And then it was in China and we thought that was in China and now it's happening here. I'm very, very concerned. Think about all the different things that people do with their car. You might buy something on Gumtree and go and pick it up. You know, all these different things that you can do. And as you said, that you won't be able to do without having to go around either a massive ring road or getting a fine, or you can't do it at all. And it's happening all over the country.
And it's the poorest who suffer. Meanwhile, the likes of Sadiq Khan roll around in taxpayer-funded cars, all of these bigwigs, they're armour-plated vehicles.
I know.
But let's say you're, painter decorator or your plumber or...
He doesn't care about you.
No, your mobile cleaner or something along those lines.
Yeah.
People who might be towards the lower end of the economic spectrum, hard-working people who go out and graft for a living every single day, who might not have the money to get a new electric van, they're the ones who are having to pay this money.
Electric vans can only take a very small amount and only got a very short range anyway. I mean, I've got a very good friend of mine, actually, Derek Baker, who owns a company called CFS Filtration, and he says something that his company could do in one day, 300-mile round trip, would take 4 days with the charging and wouldn't be able to take anywhere near the amount of the load. So this is... Make no mistake, this is about the annihilation of commerce, and they want us all sitting at home, and they especially want the poor sitting at home. This is about restriction of movement, and this is about, no cars, no anything. This is about us sitting at home.
And a total reliance on the state, because let's play this out to its
Oh, yeah, a universal
right?
basic income.
A universal basic income, a total reliance on the state. They can just turn the taps off whenever you like.
You have to be a good girl and boy, or you'll have your money turned off.
Absolutely, and it'll make it very easy for them, because any uprising like the one that we saw in Canada, all of a sudden you get your income cut off. Justin Trudeau declares it a national emergency and he gets his special measures and special powers. How long is it, do you think, before we have climate lockdowns in places where, frankly, we just don't need them in the UK?
Well, I think, when it was a little bit hot in the summer, people were talking about closing their doors and stuff like that. But in effect, these zones and these areas that you're not allowed to leave in your car are climate lockdowns in everything but name. And there are a lot of people who aren't registered disabled but who struggle. Yeah, or there's a mum who wants to get her kid to nursery or whatever. If you have to go from one road to the next because it's in a different zone, you have to go all around the ring road, you're just not going to go out. You're going to stay at home. And this whole thing about the ULEZ zones being about health and all of that, that's rubbish. I've been looking at some figures. You live longer if you live in London than if you live in the countryside. And the asthma figures, is 20 deaths per million, are the same in London as they are for the rest of the country. And the other thing that I noticed, it shows you they're a bit thick at County Hall. They said that last week they had these figures about how the admissions for asthma for children went up in 2020, 2021 in London. Hang on a minute. We were in lockdown.
Yeah.
There were no cars on the road in London. They hadn't thought that one through before they came up with their nonsense modelling, had they?
No, they hadn't at all. Now, part of me likes to think maybe we can pass this off as woke virtue signalling, and Sadiq Khan can actually go, well, hey, look, I'm appeasing the environmental mob.
Rubbish.
But it is rubbish as well, because whenever any of Just Stop Oil target anywhere, it's always in London. When Extinction Rebellion target them, it's always in London. It's costing us millions, if not billions of pounds with the activities that they do. People are dying as a result of that as well. I just can't help but wonder again if this is another way of trying to get us reliant on public transport.
Yeah.
And then that means that if the public transport goes on strike, it's 10 times worse than it is now. We have to give in to their pay demands. It's all part of a plan to try to create some kind of weird socialist, eco-infused utopia.
Absolutely. And, for example, in China, if you say something wrong or do something wrong, then you can't use the trains and the buses and the planes. So your freedom of movement will be completely curtailed. And at least in the past, you could have a horse. You're not allowed to have a horse now,
No,
are
you
you?
couldn't.
Because you'll have a compulsory purchase order on your land for them to turn it into a solar farm.
Yeah, well, given the amount of money you get fined if your dog defecates in the street, you don't think, can you imagine if you had a horse? Anyway, there you go. Lois, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Lois Perry, the director of Car 26, and let's be honest with you, a fan favourite here on GB News. Right, as Mr. Mark Steyn would say, make sure that you do stay safe and stay free. We've got Dan Wootton coming your way very, very shortly. Dan the man will be here in just a matter of moments. In fact, he's
I'm
here.
here.
Right now. What you got coming up, Dan?
I'm here.
What do you got coming up?
Well, it's my last show of the year, Patrick. I know you are here working through, and I appreciate that very much, but it is my last show, so we're going to go out with a bang and reveal our ultimate Greatest Britain and Union Jackass of the year. Plus, we've got a world-exclusive TV interview, wait for this, Patrick, with the Princess of Wales' uncle, Gary Goldsmith. Now, he is speaking out for the first time on television to defend Kate Middleton against those Netflix claims from Harry and Meghan. So it's going to be a really fascinating interview.
That is going to be really fascinating. Dan, good stuff, mate. I tell you what, mate, we all benefit here from Dan Wootton, right? Because Dan brings in guests like this and the rest of the channel benefits. So thank you very, very much. And Dan, I do really hope you have a
great
fabulous
Christmas, Patrick. I'm sorry you're working, but you love it, really, don't you?
I do, to be honest with you, mate, I do. And as long as I'm here, it keeps me out of trouble. So Dan Wootton there, make sure that you tune in for him next. He always, always, always delivers. Well, look, thank you very much, my fantastic guests, to every single one of you who's emailed in, who's tweeted in, who's put up with me instead of Mr. Mark Steyn all week. I'll be back again tomorrow, 3 till 6 and then 8 till 9. As Mr. Steyn says, stay safe, stay free.
Good evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine day across parts of the north tomorrow with sunny spells, but it is going to be a north-south split, misty, murky conditions across much of the south.